Hello, everyone. Tonight we will relax with the story, What Did Medieval People Do to Get Through the Cold Winter? Let's get started. The wind whistles through the cracks in the door. The wooden walls creak, and you are huddled on a paper-thin layer of straw, covering the cold, hard ground. There is no heat, no electricity, no bed. Thus begins your first winter in the medieval village, with a cold shock to the marrow of your bones. You pull the tattered linen over your shoulders, but it does little to keep the chill from seeping through your skin. The air stings your face every time you turn. There's no air conditioning, no down jacket, no wool socks. Just a few layers of hand-woven fabric, a pair of damp boots, and hope that you don't freeze to death in your sleep. Well, the fact is, if you actually traveled back in time to the 14th century in mid-January, you might not survive the first night. All the seemingly basic things, heat, bedding, hot water, did not exist in ordinary life, and they were not superhuman. They were just good at adapting to hardship. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually like what I do here. And don't forget to comment where you are and what time it is, so I know what season you're getting ready for bed. Now turn off the lights. Let's relax together with tonight's journey. You have been trudging through the icy plains all day. As the sun sets, you return to the small box-shaped cabin where you and 4 others have slept huddled together to keep warm. But the wind seeps through every crack in the slum, making you shiver. There is no fire. The wood ran out early in the morning. The oldest man in the group, seemingly aware of what is coming, quietly steps outside to find more dry branches. You exhale. You see your breath turn to white smoke. Winter nights in 14th century Europe were not kind. During extremely cold years, particularly the so-called Little Ice Age, that lasted from the 14th to the 19th centuries, temperatures could drop below -10 degrees Celsius. Even in low-lying areas in some villages in England, Poland, and Germany, there are records of animals freezing to death in their stables at night. People sleep next to their animals not just for the sake of friendship, but for their own survival. And so you do. You crawl out of your hay and into the stable where the cows and goats are panting. They are warm, and their pungent smell is strangely comforting in the cold night as you lie down. Your back against the damp straw, the sour smell of dried dung and animal sweat clings to your nose, but you accept it. There's no other choice. Still have the image of that afternoon, a man who collapsed from frostbite while chopping wood. The cold isn't a quick killer. It slowly saps your strength, numbs your limbs, and eventually stops your heart without you even realizing it. Weird fact? There are records of people wearing clothes made of moss. Thick moss was stuffed between 2 layers of coarse cloth, which helped retain heat and absorb sweat. You're not there yet, but who knows how creative you'll be in the coming weeks. Historians still debate whether medieval villagers actually knew how to keep warm effectively or simply survive by instinct. Some records show that they burned dried dung instead of firewood as forests became increasingly depleted. Others insist that tricks like covering their heads with hoods and keeping their feet dry were actually vital. And you, lying there, looking at the moonlight through the wooden wall, listening to the howling wind, realize a truth. Winter is not a season of rest. It is a season of fighting. A little story as you try to reach out from under your shirt to scratch your back. A bug crawls from the straw onto your hand. You flinch and almost hit the person next to you in the face. The person opens his eyes, sighs, and mumbles, "Welcome to the village. The bugs are fat this season." You chuckled. Perhaps survival came not from fire or crawling, but from a helpless laugh in the cold night. You never thought that one day, animal fat would become the most precious thing in the house. It's not gold, not salt, but soft, greasy, opaque white fat that smells a bit like biscuits forgotten in the coal basket. But in the winter, you understand that with just a little fat, you can exchange for light, warmth, food, even ... friends. The next morning, you wake up before the sun has risen. The cold makes you feel like you haven't slept at all. Your limbs are stiff as wood, and your back aches from the damp straw that was crushed last night. You tiptoe out of the barn, where the cows are still breathing steadily, emitting steam like mooing stoves. As you return home, an old woman hands you something in a small ceramic jar. Lamb fat, not for eating. She simply says, rub it on your ears before you go out, then burn some for the morning. You're stunned. Burn fat. It turns out that in the village, they used to fill a shell with fat, stuff it with a piece of cloth as a wick, and light it. It wasn't as bright as a real candle, but it burned for a long time. Pork fat was best, but sheep fat was less fishy. You tried lighting a fat lamp, and the dark room was filled with a dull yellow light, flickering like the flash of an early cell phone. Weird fact? Some records say that medieval people mixed animal fat with spices like pine, resin, or dried flowers to mask the smell. But the most interesting thing is, some people used to rub fat on their faces to keep them warm, an ancient form of moisturizer. Sounds creepy. It does, but after 2 cold sores, you give it a try. And ... it works. You apply it to your nose, your ears, and your wrist all, the places where heat is lost. You look like a human-sized meat pie when you go out into the fields. Strangely enough, the wild dogs don't bark at you anymore. Maybe they respect those who use grease properly. In the kitchen, you notice how people store lard. There's no refrigeration, so it's hung high in airtight leather bags, often sprinkled with salt to keep mice away. One time, you almost eat old lard thinking it's butter. The result? 2 days of diarrhea and a lesson you'll never forget. If it smells like wet shoes, don't eat it. One day, you are assigned to trade grease for firewood.
How?
The barterer has a rusty axe and icy eyes. He shakes the grease, checks the smell, and agrees to trade you a bundle of dry twigs. You're as happy as if you had won the lottery. Grease for a fire tonight. In a world without supermarkets, every transaction is a life or death negotiation. Historians still debate whether medieval people systematically stored fat or used it instinctively. Some say that wealthier households had their own storehouses, where they kept lard, salt, and cheese, a kind of in-house mini supermarket. Others say that most ordinary people lived from day to day. Fat was a use it if you have it. Don't have it if you don't have it. You don't care much about the argument. Just know that without fat, the night will be pitch black, and your skin will blister like a pie left on the stove. You learn to scrape fat from bones, skim it from stews, and gather it up bit by bit. Each lump of fat is like a brick in the building blocks of spring. A light-hearted joke? Once you saw a village kid eating lard like it was cake. When caught, he shrugged and said, "At least my mouth is warm." Not wrong. And then, as night falls, you light your own oil lamp for the first time. The yellow light dances on the wall, casting your shadow like a little ghost. You smile, feeling as if you have just grasped the first secret of survival. In the freezing cold, a small dot of light can warm the heart. The first bed you ever slept in the village was not a bed, was a ragged pile of straw close to the cold ground, between an abandoned mill and a cat that no one dared to chase away. You thought you knew what it was like to have trouble sleeping, until you discovered that here beds are not for sleeping alone. That night, your landlady shows you where to sleep, a small corner by the stone wall where potatoes used to be stored. Now, the potatoes have been eaten since the fall, and the space is perfect for a new person. As you lie down, you bump into someone's feet. A child, fast asleep, bread on his mouth, is propped up against you as if you were a mattress. Across from you is a large man, snoring like a cow, and next to him an old woman is mumbling prayers in a language you don't recognize. The air smells sour of sweat, wood smoke, and cat piss. But at least it's warm. You're grateful, because in this cold, the warmth comes not from the fireplace, but from human breath. Strange fact, many medieval households no concept of separate beds instead. The whole family, parents, children, and sometimes strangers, slept together on a straw mattress or simply a wooden board covered with animal skin that kept them warmer and also saved space. You learn quickly. The next night you gather the straw and spread it out in a corner. But soon you notice something strange. The straw is crackling. Not because you're rolling around. Something's crawling in it. You jump up, lift up your shirt, and find a small black bug. It's round, hard, and smells bad. "Welcome to the village bugs," a little girl whispers from the corner. "They were here before you." You frown. Then you remember what you were told. Always pound the hay 3 times before you go to sleep and check with the light. You do, and there are more than just bugs. There are chickens. Yes, that's right. A hen hops down from the beam and scratches at the straw you're lying on. She looks at you as if to say, "I slept here first." And you understand that, in this village, bed priority is not given to humans. It's given to whoever gets there first, whether they have 2 legs or 2 wings. In the darkness, you begin to notice sounds. There is chewing from the other side. The hiccups of someone sleeping soundly, and a soft whimper from outside, possibly a wolf. You pull up the covers, or rather an old piece of goatskin, and try to lull yourself to sleep. Here's an interesting historical fact you'll hear about in your village. In some regions like Germany and France during the Middle Ages, people used to design trunk beds, box-like beds with sliding doors to keep in maximum warmth. 2 or 3 people would crawl into these wooden boxes, close the lid like a coffin, and sleep soundly. You'll find it both convenient and terrifying. Historians still debate whether co-sleeping was truly universal or just a matter of the poor. Some monastic records show that monks slept in groups, but with compartments and raised beds. In the village, you're living in the real world. A cat just kicked the straw out of your bed. A lighthearted joke. One night, you wake up with cold feet. You feel your feet warm and find something soft and warm. You silently thank someone for putting their feet near you. But the next morning you discover it's a baby goat. It's sleeping soundly, its head still resting on your chest. From then on, everyone calls you the chosen one of the goats. In the end, you learn a great lesson. You don't need a nice bed, just lie down without shivering. You don't need quiet, just warm. And if you have to sleep with chickens, cats, or goats, that's okay too. In the medieval winter, sleep is not a dream, it is a victory. You used to think taking a shower was simple. It's just some water, some soap, and a few minutes of relaxation. But then winter comes, and you realize bathing is a risky act, almost suicidal. This morning, when you scooped water from the jar outside the door, the water was so cold that it numbed your hands in 3 seconds. Before you could wash your face, you dropped the whole ladle on the ground because you could no longer control your fingers. A village child walked by and giggled. "You're new? Don't bathe. We call that the devil's game." You think he's joking? Until you hear the landlady tell the story of last year's blacksmith. He decided to wash himself clean in January for good luck in the new year. The next morning, he was found, stiff as a salted fish, lying next to a bucket of water. His head still wet. He wasn't sick. He was just cold. So cold that his heart stopped when the north wind blew through the roof. You swear you won't let that happen to you. The historical facts are actually quite clear. Medieval people rarely bathe. In winter, this is not because they are lazy, but because they know exactly what to expect when their skin comes into contact with cold water. Most sources indicate that people at that time prioritized staying dry over being clean. In monasteries, monks were allowed to bathe at most 5 times a year. And in winter, usually not at all. Instead, they wipe their bodies with a rough cloth soaked in warm water. If they have one, or use wood ash or dried herbs to rub on their skin, try the same method, using dried rosemary leaves mixed with bran, rubbing it on your neck and back. The result: your skin feels itchy and smells like an oven. You also learn that soap, when it is available, is made of tallow and lye, and that the smell is not pleasant at all. What you use is more like a wet lump of clay, lathers very little, and makes you suspect that you are turning yourself into a barbecue rather than cleaning yourself. Interesting fact: in some regions like Scandinavia, the ancients believed that taking a hot bath in winter opens the body up to the cold devil. So after each bath, they would drink strong alcohol or cover themselves with blankets and sit close to the fire for hours to chase away the cold. You are not so bold. One day you boil water in a large pot, let it cool, and then gingerly wipe each part of your body. But by the time you are halfway there, you are shaking. Your legs are purple, and your lips are starting to crack. You stop, wrap yourself up, and decide, ... Spring will take care of the rest. Historians still debate how dirty medieval people were. Some say they weren't as dirty as we think, washing their clothes and faces daily and masking their odors with perfumes. Others say that given the conditions, standards of cleanliness were simply different. And perhaps we were the weird ones. You have completely changed your perspective. Someone asks you, "How often do you take a shower?" You look at them and ask, "How long do you want to live?" A light-hearted joke. One day, you were standing by the fireplace, taking off your shirt too dry, your sweat. An old lady walked by and nodded. "Your back is so white, you must have never had soap." You smiled. "You've never had a cold either, so I think it's fine." At the end of the day, you pile up the straw, huddle under the goat skin, and think of the modern bathtub with its hot water jets. The thought makes you laugh and shiver at the same time. Because here, bathing is not about being clean. Bathing is about choosing whether you want to risk death or not. You never thought a pot could decide between life and death. But here, the middle of a medieval winter, a broken panhandle can kill you faster than any curse. That afternoon, you're kneeling by the fire, trying to boil a thin porridge of oats and dried turnip skins. The fire is weak, the wood has rotted, and the cast-iron pot, the only treasure in the house, has begun to crackle. You don't pay attention. You're hungry. Who cares about a small crack in the pot when your stomach is growling like a drum? Then, crack. A dry cracking sound like bone breaking. The pot handle breaks. You pull your hand back before it falls over. The boiling porridge spills onto the ground, flowing towards the fire. Steam rises. The room is hazy. And you stand there, coughing, regretting both the porridge and the pot. That pot has been passed down through 3 generations. It was used to make soup, boil water, make medicine, even pour candles. Without the pot, you lose almost all of your cooking ability. And in a place with no repair shops, no spare parts, no shoppy, you suddenly step back into prehistoric times. Official. Historical event? Many medieval European villages, cast iron pots are one of the most valuable assets. So much so that when making a will, people would leave the pot to the best son instead of a dowry. In England, France, and even the Carpathians, a good pot could be exchanged for a sheep or half a season of firewood. You remember? The landlady once told you about a family by the river. They had 7 children, but only one pot. Every night, the children had to line up to drink porridge from that pot in order of ... height. Whoever is short eats last. Whoever is tall gets the thickest portion. She laughed, not knowing that you were seriously thinking about eating ... standing. Up to look taller? A strange fact? The ancients summed to mispost cast iron pot on church wall as a pledge to God, I will take good care of it. Some places even hold a blessing ceremony for the new pot, which may sound ridiculous. But if you think about the survival value, it makes a strange sense. When your pot breaks, the whole village knows about it within an afternoon. People whisper. Some people secretly come to see the dead pot. An old man touches the cracked edge of the iron, shakes his head and says, "It cracked because of insufficient fire, not because of too much fire." You don't understand, but you nod, like someone standing in front of a loved one's coffin. Historians still debate whether medieval peasant families had adequate cooking facilities, or whether they had to share with neighbors. Some accounts describe communal kitchens in several adjacent homes. Others claim that each household managed to own at least one cast iron pot and one iron pan. Even if it took years of saving, you can't wait for history to explain itself. You have to. Do something. So you go to the edge of the woods and find a lightning-struck stump. The wood is easy to split, dry and light. You carve a crude wooden pan and a bowl from the trunk. People look at you as if you're a craftsman who stumbled into a village. But when you make your first pot of porridge in that wooden bowl by placing the bowl in a borrowed large pot, you find yourself not only surviving, but also creating a lighthearted joke. You show off your wooden pot. A child asks, "Can you eat it?" You joke, "No porridge. But if you're really hungry, the pot will do." That night, you look at the broken pot, then at the dancing fire, and you understand, sometimes it is not the pot that keeps the person alive, but the one who keeps the pot alive. You used to think that moldy bread was a waste. In modern times, the sight of a few green spots on a loaf of bread would make people frown. But here, in the middle of a medieval winter, mold is not a sign of decay, it is a sign of survival. This morning you've been given a loaf of stale bread, a dense, heavy black loaf made from barley mixed with straw and bran. You turn it over and over, only to find that one side has developed a grayish-green mold, like moss growing on a gravestone. You look around expecting to be scolded for trying to eat it, but the landlady shrugs. Just cut the mold off. Then she smiles. Or leave it as is. You take a bite. The first bite is tough as shoe leather, dry so hard it feels like chewing on a wooden floor. But you swallow. In the second bite, it feels better. Maybe it's the numbness in your tongue. Official historical event. During the Middle Ages, especially during the harsh winters, people regularly eat moldy or nearly moldy bread as a normal part of their diet. Not only was mold not considered as dangerous as it is today, some even believed it was good for digestion. An old lady recounts that her grandfather used to cure a sore throat by chewing moldy crusts mixed with apple cider. Was it effective? You don't dare ask, but you notice, no matter what they ate, they never complained. Maybe it was because they knew complaining doesn't make you feel fuller. A strange fact?
Oh.
In some documents from the 13th century, monks recorded that green mold tastes spicy like black pepper and cleanses the intestines like ginger. Today, it is known that it is penicillium, a distant relative of the modern antibiotic penicillin. Of course, not all molds are good, but for them, the choice was eat mold or eat nothing. You notice a little secret? They don't keep the bread in a sealed jar. They hang it high near the fire where the smoke slows down the mold. If mold still appears, they cut it up, dry it, Grind it into flour and make new bread. Bread reborn from bread. You think, this is a food cycle. Historians still debate whether moldy bread in the Middle Ages was actually safe. Some say the mold common on barley was less virulent in the cold climate. Others are skeptical, suggesting that many people suffered from mild neurotoxicity that went undiagnosed because they didn't know it was food poisoning. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. They are not well, but they are alive. In the afternoon, you meet an old man who is grinding up some old breadcrumbs, mixing them with beet juice and a little fat. He calls it festival soup. What kind of festival is it? He chuckles. The festival of survival? A light-hearted joke? A child asks you, do you know why bread is harder than stone? Because it's used to throw mice? The child shakes his head. Because if it were soft, people would eat it all. Soft is a luxury. You eat your portion of cake, leaving nothing behind. And when night falls, your stomach, though not full, is warm enough. Understand that, in this day and age, it's not good food that nourishes you. It's the ability to accept the worst as if it were normal. And strangely, as you chew the last bits of mold, you feel a slight sting on your tongue. Not exactly delicious, but something like hope. You used to believe that winter was only scary because of the cold. But then, one night, you stood in the middle of the village square, the wind whistling through your straw coat, and you heard Amy's stomach growled. That's when you realize the real fear is hunger. A hunger that no longer makes you ravenous, but leaves you frighteningly calm. You haven't eaten anything for 3 days. A few dried turnips, 2 pieces of moldy bread, a handful of oats, soaked in brackish water. No meat, no fresh vegetables, no hope of a meal. You pass your neighbor's house. Smell of stewed bones wafts in the air, and all you can think of is not envy. But how can I borrow some of that broth without being branded a beggar? Remember the words of the landlady? No one is. Killed in the coldest month. The next month, when the barn is empty and you see it clearly, the eyes are sunken. The children stop asking for food and just sit there licking their hands. And you think about eating the candles. No kidding. A few tallow candles left over from Christmas, you sniff them again. The stench almost makes you gag, but you think of the calories. Actually, historically, many people ate real candles during winter famines. Burning fat is nauseating, but it is still fat. Some communities in the mountains of Europe used to hold candle-eating ceremonies, not for religious reasons, but for nothing else. You're not there yet. But you do something almost equivalent. You boil the shoe leather. An important historical event during the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317. People across Europe boiled leather straps, leather clothing, even book covers made from animal skins to make a temporary meal. You have no books, but a pair of old worn-out shoes. You tear off the soles, wash them in a stream, and boil them 3 times in the ashes of your kitchen. The result? Substance as tough as rope. But you swallow it. Your stomach is unhappy, but your brain feels like it has just feasted. Strange. Fact, there is a dish called dark soup, recorded in some ancient texts. It consists of nothing more than boiling water and the shadow of bread placed next to it. It is believed that seeing food in water, even without actually eating it, helps to reduce hunger. You hear this and try. Looking at the shadow of your hand in the water, you are not full, but at least you laugh at yourself. Historians still debate the spiritual survival of medieval people. Some say that religious faith helped them survive the famine. Others say that dark humor making fun of the disaster was how they kept their sanity. You think both are true, but you lean toward the latter because you're living off a child's joke. You know what? If you don't eat, you don't get diarrhea. After laughing, you realize it's true, a light-hearted story. One night you secretly took the last bean from the jar and divided it into 3 parts. 1 for yourself, 1 for the cat, and 1 for the stove, which you threw into the fire. Did anyone laugh? No. But you felt like you still had someone to share it with, even if it was with the fire. And then, at the end of the night, when the stomach is so empty it stops growling, you understand. Winter doesn't end when the snow melts. It ends when someone is still strong enough to tell the story of how they made it through. You light a candle, listen to the wind whistling outside the window, and you whisper, "I am still here." Why? And that in the cold and hungry moment is like a small victory of the human heart. When you live in the modern world, you take light for granted. A flick of a switch, and the whole room lights up like a Broadway show. But in the middle of a medieval winter, you realize light is not something it is something you fight to keep. That night, you wake up to something hitting your forehead, not someone's hand. A drop of water. You open your eyes, look up at the ceiling. The thatched roof is leaking. The water drips down your face, drop by drop, like an hourglass counting down. Patience. You fumble to turn on the oil lamp. But the wick is wet. You hit the wick. You scream. The darkness doesn't care. You crawl to the stove, trying to start a fire with the dead embers. It takes 10 minutes of wind and shaking hands to pull a weak spark from the damp wood. The flame sways as if about to give up. But then it clings to the straw, and you see again. Historical event. In winter, especially in the Nordic and Central European regions, light is a scarcer resource than food. The sun rises late and sets early. Some places have only 6 hours of daylight. People rely entirely on fire in the stove, oil lamps, tallow candles, anything that will burn. You see, a wet wick means a whole night of darkness. You hear that some ancient monasteries only lit 1 candle in the dining hall, and those sitting far away ate in the dark. Not because of stinginess, but because candles made from lamb fat or bees, more expensive and difficult to make than any food. A strange fact? In some villages, people use dried fish as lamps, especially herring. They stuff fat into the fish's belly, light a wick from its mouth and light it. It's bright, fragrant, ... No, it's burnt, but it's light. And in the long winter night, like nostalgia, anything that burns is welcome. You start keeping the fire going like you keep breathing. Before going to bed, you bury the red coals in the ashes, place a hot brick on top, and cover them with a thin layer of earth, like a primitive carbon battery. The next morning, you dig out the coals, and the fire is still there. It's like a small miracle. Historians debate whether medieval people really lived in the dark. Some say they got used to the darkness and considered it normal. Their eyes adapted, their minds accepted it. But others claim that people are always afraid of the dark, always crave the light, and whenever possible, they seek to light a spark. You believe the latter. Because you see, whenever you light a lamp, no matter how weak people gather, they don't say much. They just sit, watch the light sway, and smile. As if with just 1 spark, the world is still worth living. A light-hearted joke? One day you accidentally mixed rice flour with ashes and poured it into a grease lamp. It didn't burn, but it exploded with a small pop. The cat in the kitchen jumped up and knocked over the pot of soup. You looked at the overflowing porridge and laughed dryly. At least it's light now, and hot. You begin to cherish the light as a friend. You name each flame, slow burner, fancy, smoky. And when someone tells you to go to bed early, you whisper, "Wait, I have to say hello to the nightlight." The night ends with a single light, sparkling like a star in your hand. And you understand, in an age without electricity, a light is an affirmation that you are still alive. You have not given up. You've heard people say that winter is the season of hibernation. But here in the middle of a medieval village, you discover a rather paradoxical truth. Winter is a season of relentless work. You work in the dark, with numb hands and an empty stomach. One morning, before the sun has even risen around 9 a.m., you are awakened by the landlady shouting, "Where's the water? Where is the mortar? Who is guarding the chicken coop?" You jump up, bang your head against the beam, and then scramble to your feet like a hedgehog waking up out of season. Before you can take a sip of water, you are given the task. Turn the hand mill to make flour. You think, spinning the mill sounds relaxing. But less than 5 minutes later, you're panting, sweating in the 2-degree cold, and your shoulders ache like you've just fought a bull. The millstone, it weighs 35 pounds, is hard, creaks, and smells of old stone. There's no flour in sight, only your knees shaking with hunger, a historical event. During the winter, work does not decrease. Change type only when the crops were gone. People turn to milling flour, mending shoes, weaving baskets, repairing roofs, making tools, chopping wood, boiling water, brewing beer, sewing clothes, keeping fires, guarding barns, and keeping everyone in the house. No fighting, because to suffocating you, do it all, and are good at none of it. A strange fact? In some villages, people used to have a winter silence law, not for meditation, but to save energy. They believed that'll a lot get cold fast, because opening your mouth causes heat loss. You're not sure if that's true, but after a day of work and no one has said more than 3 sentences to anyone, you start to appreciate the sound of a cat meowing. You are given a new task. Basket weaving from willowit sounds like art, but the truth is, your hands are rough, stiff, and shaky in the vine. Doesn't like being bent. You get hit in the face 3 times by the vine, and in the end, you make a basket so misshapen that the landlady thinks you're trying to make a mousetrap. Historians debate whether medieval people had the leisurely winters that many people imagine, lying on the stove, telling stories, drinking beer. Some say yes, they call it sedentary season. But others, and you belong to this group, assert winter is a silent war with time, with weariness, and with oneself. One day, you help an old man shell flax seeds, a tedious and complicated task. After 3 hours, 80% of the seeds fall to the ground. He looks at you and smiles kindly. You were not born to farm. You nod. Then he adds, you were born to learn. But unfortunately here, winter doesn't allow anyone to learn. It makes everyone do the same work. A light-hearted joke? You try to make a comb from a cow bone after 2 hours. You create something that looks like a prehistoric weapon. You show it off, and a little girl laughs. This comb will make you bald. You don't laugh, but you keep the comb. As a trophy, at night, you sit around the kitchen with others. Everyone is doing something with their hands, mending pants, tying rope, breaking rocks, cutting wood, spinning thread, and no one complains. Because everyone understands, this winter, if you stop, you will be cold, you will be hungry, and you will be so sad that you will not want to live anymore. You look at your hands, red, calloused, but working, and you think, my hands are not beautiful, but they do not give up. Maybe that is the new definition of hard working in this world. This morning, you open your eyes and are not sure if the sun has risen yet. Not because it is still dark, but because the winter light never comes as you remember. It comes as a faint apology from the sky, cold, thin, and pale as milk and ashes. You wrap yourself in a blanket, drag yourself outside, and you feel nothing. Your feet are so numb you can knock on the door with your heels without pain, but you're used to it. It's the third month of winter, and you're amazingly still alive. You stop in the middle of the yard, where the snow is as thin as frost on frozen mud. You look up, there's no sun, only the wind that brushes your skin like someone's hand, gentle but not gentle. You don't shiver, you smile. Historical events. Late winter, in many parts of medieval Europe, was the deadliest time of year, not because it was colder, but because people's housed of strength, food, medicine, and hope. This is the time called Hungry Gap, the deadly gap between the old grain stocks depleted and the new harvest yet to come. The priests, the doctors, and even the village midwives were all preparing themselves. This month, there will be bodies. You hear strange stories about late winter, people who get lost in the snow and are found with only their shoes on, mothers who give half a loaf of bread to their children and then never wake up again. I'm an old man who climbed onto a roof. To dice it, slipped, fell, and had to be buried the same day because the ground was about to freeze forever. A strange fact? In many places during winter, medieval people eat grass growing in moldy roofs. In some places, lichen, moss, and even rotten bean sprouts are cooked into a soup called hope soup. It's not tasty, but the name warms your heart. You haven't eaten roof moss, but yesterday you pried some moss from the cracks in the walls too. See what it tasted like. It's not tasty, but it's not poisonous. You put it in your pocket, like, in case there's nothing else tomorrow. Historians still debate, how did medieval people endure such winters without going mad? Some say it was religious faith. Some say it was the power of community. Some believe, they are not fine, but they are good at pretending. You find yourself somewhere between the three assumptions. A light-hearted joke. One day you poke your head outside and see the sky covered in fog. You say out loud, it looks like the end of the world. An old man standing nearby replies without looking up, there you go, no food. In the afternoon, you help your landlady carry out a large wooden tub to catch the drops of water that fall from the roof. To prepare for the planting season, she says, and to remind me that snow melts. You are silent. Something moves inside. Something like gratitude, not because you have much, but because you don't lose everything tonight. You sit near the stove, doing nothing. Your hands do not grind flour, mend baskets, or light fires. Your hands are at rest, because you know, even if only for a brief moment, that you have lived through a winter that few people have the chance to recount. You breathe slowly. You put your feet on the hot bricks, out, and you think of little things. The warmth left in the coals, the cake scorched but not moldy, and the faint light of a last candle. Little things. But you hold on. You have gone through winter. Thank you for joining me on this icy journey. The story of medieval winter is not just about cold, but about resilience. About the little things that keep us from despair, and about how we find ourselves in the darkness. Wishing you a warm night's sleep. And if it's snowing outside, know that you live in a time when you don't need to eat moss to survive anymore. Good night.